So today we're displaying collection sets 271 through 315 of 360, as in the 360 degrees of the circle, as space-time communication coordinates geometrically and conceptually defined by the degrees of a two-dimensional circle, as Waggle dance, as Mandala, as medicine wheel, as directional, seasonal, life stage compass, and calendar. And yesterday I did a piece that was a minor adjustment in the communication coordinate system based on the fact that the fifth unit on the front page of the fifth video, from which I had been collecting numerical values, as one of the facets of the system of observation as communication, referring to observation as signified by the number of views for each of these videos. And I had noticed that on the fifth of these videos, though I had attempted to change the numerical value by observing the video a fifth time and hence, engaging our communication system and signifying a particular space-time travel communication coordinate, and that specific space-time travel communication coordinate happened to be Miles Davis from the album Nefertiti, and the track that I wanted to reference was the fifth track on that album, which is a song called Riot. And Riot, of course, is an anagram for trio, and Miles Davis is probably aware of that and playing with that idea. Particularly with the idea of a quartet being trio plus one. Anyway, those numerical values in that song, are playful, and but also, the social context in which that word riot occurs on that particular album. And I'll look up the date, but it relates to a series of references that we've been making in relationship to the album by Sly and the Family Stone, which is a response to the Marvin Gaye song, "What's Going On," which was a hit in the same year that Sly and the Family Stone released their response. And the album's title that Sly and the Family Stone, Sly Stone released is a riot's going on. And let me look up Miles Davis and Nefertiti. Let's see what year that is. So this album was released in March of 1968. And precedes, the Sly and the Family Stone album by a couple of years, but it's within certainly within the same context and zeitgeist, and belongs clearly still to this period of civil rights and the ongoing struggle against institutional oppression and violence, and some of the ways in which this struggle is played out. And in certain in a certain kind of ironic context, I've been using references to this struggle comparatively in relationship to the right-wing insurrection that occurred on January 6th, 2021. And the reason for that, is to call attention to these very different relationships to authoritarian and oppressive apparati that these manifestations of conflict and of physical action, right, represent. And the reason that I made the corrective video yesterday, and I'll go ahead and click on it. It has no views at this time. I'll interfere with the numerical, but in clicking on this video, that is a correction for the number of views that I was unable to designate in Unpacking Our Library. I believe it was sixth entry of Unpacking Our Library, and I was unable to get the observations, the views from 4 to 5, and hence I made this corrective video, and addressing the inability of the system, or what I interpreted as being interference in the system, so made this corrective video 5 views. Right now, the numbers designate 2, 4, 2, 6. And I almost don't want to lose that, because that's a reference to a space-time travel coordinate that refers to a musical piece called Bhairavi, which is a raga, but which refers to the mother goddess Bhairavi. And viewers of my work over long stretches of time will remember that I have a relationship to Bhairavi, particularly in the form of Tripura Bhairavi, and that Tripura Bhairavi was in some ways the matron deity of our attempt to honor the 100th anniversary, right, of women's suffrage, and elect our first female president, which didn't happen, unfortunately, but But longtime viewers of my work will remember that in the period leading up to the particularly in the primaries, before it became an impossibility, but in that election, that Tripura Bharavi, occupied this position and of presiding over, right, the information and systems and strategies of political work and the dissemination of information that belonged to this project of electing our first woman president. And in particular, longtime viewers of my work will remember that Bharavi's yantra was a central symbol of this project, and of course the triangle in Bharavi's yantra, we had related to Judy Chicago's triangular representation of her dinner party, and various historical feminists that had been invited to the dinner party, configured in our project in various ways, and were utilized as representations of ideas, characters, and in addition to that, there was a critique of Judy Chicago's dinner party, and particularly along lines that were critical of a certain kind of white middle class, exclusionary feminism, and we attempted to address that by reorganizing in some way the dinner party and redistributing the power dynamics of the organization of those elements in feminism that may have been excluded, and as you recall, figures like Angela Davis were central in that reorganization. So I'm at this point in the development of our political present, and again, turning once again to the need for the United States to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment and support National Organization of Women now, and particularly important because we're once again engaging these issues of the overturning of women's rights, and in these major ways, right, by this this particular version of the Supreme Court that is not only an ideological minority, but in terms of the progress of civil and human rights in the United States, seems to be returning us to a period in which the Puritans burned witches, and I'm sure that many of these, particularly the misogynist members of the Supreme Court, would be very happy with that idea of burning witches, and I don't know whether one of the requirements of school prayer, which seems to be open as a possibility of our democracy, in which religion is no longer separate from the governmental state apparatus. But perhaps if prayer returns to the schools, that they can pray for the souls of these witches they burn before pledging allegiance to the flag for which stands fascist ideology and patriarchy and a very strange version of Christianity, which, as I've argued before, has almost nothing to do with the Gospels of this holy person who in fact, for his time, if one takes into account the period, right, in which he addresses, these social issues, was progressive in terms of women's rights. And I'm not saying that Jesus was a feminist, but I am saying that in the context in which he existed, and in which women were excluded both from social events and participation in governmental organizations and participations in religious rites and rituals, at least certain authorized forms of religious rites and rituals, that he was radical in that time, right, in relationship to these issues, but not represented so, right, in this long history of the Romanization of Christianity and what follows. But in any case, I'm hesitant to change the numbers because I like the reference to Baravi being there. But I did want to talk a little bit about this need that I felt to make the correction and perhaps why I felt compelled to make the adjustment in the communication and therefore reference the space-time communication coordinate 222.5, which, as I mentioned before, is a reference to this Miles Davis album from what was it, released in September 1968, and the track title being Riot. So clicking on that, and now I will have changed the communication coordinate numbers, but notes towards a non-delusional, unhacker-altered, post-Galileonine, reality-specific representation of space-time travel, communication coordinate 222.5, and yes, indeed, what's actually going on. So what I was attempting to do with that title is to address a number of issues. So the non-delusional part, notes towards a non-delusional representation of this number, means a number of different things, right? In this constellation of politics and actions, there's something that we sometimes refer to as the election denial movement, right? And this election denialist movement, or whatever it is, inspired the riots of January 6th, and were encouraged by our former fascist president, Donald Trump, and who should rightly have been prosecuted for his involvement in this insurrection. And generally I'm against the death penalty, but sometimes if you're gonna enlist the death penalty, you want to do it for someone like Hitler, right? Or some fascist dictator that's destroying, right, the fabric of our democracy and our ability to communicate with one another in reasonable terms, and that aren't subject to constant acts of terrorism and suppression and violence, right? So that non-delusional refers to that state of mind that can recognize that that in fact elections were at least as fair as they had ever been in 2020, and that this idea that the election was stolen was in fact in very many ways like a projection, right? Because for some time the Electoral College and the way, and we've talked about this in numerous contexts, but the Electoral College and the way that the voting clout is now organized, and the distribution of voting districts, through the articulation and drawing of maps that are, for the most part, wildly gerrymandered, right? And scientifically, like gerrymandered, like with this apparatus that is like incredibly detailed in the way that it can manipulate voting districts, and that under those conditions, which are misrepresentations of our social fabric, the reality of our social fabric, that even though we have had in more than one instance an election in which a Democratic candidate won the popular vote, nevertheless the gerrymandered and voter clout manipulated Electoral College system has given the presidency to a Republican. And so the idea that this election was stolen when Joe Biden won, and I'm not a Biden fan, I would have voted for Bernie Sanders if I had the opportunity. And before that, as Tripura Bharavi will let you know, we spent a lot of time trying to elect our first woman president, but nevertheless, by in the option between the devil and the deep blue sea, I'll take the deep blue sea, right? So anyway, so Biden won both the popular vote and the Electoral College vote, and it should have been a landslide, right? It should have been a total landslide. But because of the way that the Electoral College is so rigged and so extraordinarily in favor of the Republican Party, that it wasn't as much of a landslide as it could have been, and so I think one of the reasons that the insurrectionist opportunity and the election denial movement, if one can think of it as such, or consciousness, perhaps that false consciousness could have so much momentum, is that Trump had prepared his base for it long in advance of losing the election, and probably because he knew, right, he was going to lose the election, that he prepared his base and prepared them in multiple ways, but a lot of it was about how Biden's popularity was fake news, this and this and this, anything that stood as an obstacle in the course of his retaining the presidency was fake news, and those polls that demonstrated that he didn't have a strong popular support, and the a lot of reasons for that even exceed, right, his fascism, like the economic, failures and difficulties that emerged from this global pandemic, and the failure on the part of the Senate and the House and other legislative bodies to adequately respond to those economic needs and various things. But in any case, he had very much laid the groundwork for this delusional idea that there was no way that he could lose this election, right? And so then and the right-wing media, particularly Rupert Murdoch's Fox News, but other representations of right-wing media, had responded to that as well, and laid this sort of foundation or bedrock of delusional and conspiratorial consciousness promulgation, right? That participated, right, in the drive and the momentum that these various conspiracy theorists picked up. So the non-delusional refers to that, and then unhacker altered. Okay, so what I wanted to do was talk about the way that hacker altered, or so hacking can do a number of things, and there may be a number of dimensions to hacking that we need to weed through, but what I'm trying to refer to is a relationship between the way that certain kinds of hacking and of let's first maybe I should first talk about what I see as potentially like separate domains of interference in virtual and digital systems of communication, and define those differences. First of all, it seems to me that there are quite clearly two realms that that aren't necessarily as discrete as one would imagine, but can be separated, right? And so there's this one realm that belongs to you could call it like the panoptical corporate realm, right? So the panoptical corporate realm is like Google and Apple and Jeff Bezos and it belongs to the owners of other social media, like Twitter and Facebook, and it's the rationale for why Elon Musk wanted to purchase Twitter in the first place, right? Because he wants to control the system and control the flow of information, and just like Rupert Murdoch does, right? And maybe not for such different purposes, because ultimately that these individuals who control the flow of information, whatever ideology that they belong to, are about making money, and you see that in relationship to figures like Joe Manchin. Like, it would be easy to think of Joe Manchin as this someone who just wants, right, attention, and enjoys the fact that as this sort of pivotal figure that's supposed to represent the interests of the Democratic Party, that he can always interfere with anything that's placed in legislation and side sort of with the Republicans. And but really the truth is that the reason that he does this is because he has stakes in, he owns industries that benefit from coal, and Joe Manchin receives more money, even more money than any Republican in the House or the Senate from the fossil fuel industries, right? And so it's easy to imagine that more is involved in his decisions than simply the flow of cash. But in fact, it's that simple. It's that simple. It's that Joe Manchin, has essentially like sold all of our futures and sold the possibility of life on Earth so that he can have more cash and buy more crap, right? And and that's all it is. And the reason that it seems like incomprehensible is because what's Joe Manchin going to do with more hamburgers, or whatever it is that he buys that is more important than the survival of our planet, right? And you look at the guy and you're like, well, you don't look like you have such good taste that this stuff is really worth it, But never mind, that's the motivation. So anyway, so there's the panoptical corporate part of and that it's probably not even best described as a hacker, but it's the way that these information systems are regulated all the time. So for example, so I had more communication systems, more social media systems in the period from 2018 to 2020 than just YouTube, right? And YouTube's relationship to Google, we can discuss, but after long periods of engaging these activities of information and communication as a kind of like guerrilla theater, right? Guerrilla political theater. Tripura Baravi and all the efforts that she made was like summarily like removed from the social media universe, and not by Trump and that legislation, but like right after Biden was elected and took office, and I thought that was really interesting, and that form of censorship and the removal of my access to certain domains, right, of communication was the result of censorship on the part of this. I hardly would consider Biden to be a representation of the left. He's probably not even as left as Eisenhower, right? So it's that even the word, right, like the radical left is utilized to refer to these like centrists who just a few decades ago would have made good Republicans is ironic and amusing to me, but so that particular moment, right, of censorship in the process of my communication systems or our communication systems as a contracting phi through theta belongs to that domain of the panoptical corporate, right? And you see it often, like, so if you attack or make known or publicize, right, the unionization and organization of unions in Amazon, then you get attacked by Jeff Bezos. If you talk about the way that Apple like has there's a lot to talk about, and Apple has become like this tool, right, for collecting information and it utilizes these discourses that are totally irrelevant to it in order to do this, right? Like a few months ago, Apple came out with this thing. It's like, well, we're gonna like gather all the information from all the iPhones that are out there. And the reason that we're doing this is because we want to protect children, and so we're looking for child pornography, which is like a total lie and misrepresentation. Because if you're really going to do that, that all you have to do is go on the internet and you can find the sources of these things and you could take them down. But they're not interested in that. They're interested in gathering your information so that they can use it and they can sell it and they can make money from it, right? Just like Joe Manchin, like, is not interested in whatever, excuse, enters into the discourse, but is interested in making money from these fossil fuel industries, right? Okay, so there's that, entity, and then there's like what we refer to probably as, more correctly, right, hacker, right? And this, we have this image of this renegade, individual who's detached from whatever systems and that, operates in this, independent and if not, anarchist, but outside of the system, and that image is probably falls from the very outset. These people tend to like work for Apple, or they may not, or whatever it is, or the local or Google or whatever, or the local internet provider or whatever, but they're not Luddites that returned to school and became techies. They are integrated into the system in one way, and whatever delusions that they have regarding their existing outside the system, or as this avataric form of outsider or outlier, they tend to be pretty well incorporated into the panoptical universe, and I guess the reason that I was troubled by that I have been troubled by for quite some time, alterations in the space-time travel communication system, and inability to, for example, if you watch a video, click on something and the view number is supposed to change. Just like if you go to your toolbox and you know that you have a screwdriver, you don't want to go to your toolbox and realize that your screwdriver suddenly turned into a hammer. Well, there's something undemocratic about that, right? And there's something very undemocratic about that kind of hacking and altering, and it's not, it seems to me, and this is the whole point, it's not unlike the January 6ers, right? That feel that because they support Trump, that they should be able to alter the fabric of the reality of our universe, and it doesn't matter how many people voted for Trump. Let's just say he won. And space-time travel communication coordinates, initially were created as a way of communication, so that certain things could be shared without saying them directly, and there are a lot of reasons for that, and some of those reasons are pedagogical and intellectual, in philosophical, and part of an education in semiotics, and so that learning, right, to operate in communication systems that are indirect and lateral, and that involve durations and time spans, and exist in the present, and exist across spaces and stretches and histories of time, is a pedagogical tool. It's a teaching tool. It's a tool that develops the mind in a particular way. And so it's in a way more interesting than saying or writing down on a piece of paper, hi, how are you, and sending it. If you have to find a way of saying this that utilizes a complex system of coordinated and interactive references that are, both cultural, historical, and political references, then you're doing more work, right? Your mind is doing more work, and so part of the apparatus is based on that, and part of it is based on the fact that when I had comments open on my site, the only sort of comments that I would get were things like B stater, you are a half-wit, and with various spelling errors or whatever, and so I didn't want to have to filter all of those comments out, and I wasn't really getting anything of value. And so creating a system in which you have to do a lot of work and you have to put in a lot of thought to use the system means that I get to communicate with intelligent entities that are for the most part I find may be worth communicating with, as opposed to someone who's going to send you a message B stater, you are half-wit, based on the fact that I have whatever you want to call it, I have a cognitive difference that makes it difficult for me to spell words correctly, pronounce and recognize textual representations of words that I haven't seen before or that I'm not very familiar with, counting, linear sequencing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, very difficult. Addition is very difficult. Subtraction is very difficult. So I've also created a system that's good for me, because a lot of what I have to do in organizing space-time travel communication coordinates is cognitive work that's very difficult for me, just like writing is very difficult. That's why the book 144, in addition to being, a representation of spiritual courage and the recognition of those individuals who have demonstrated spiritual courage and belong, in this privileged position of being recorded in history and across time. It's one of the reasons why this book is also very difficult for me, is because I write it by hand, and so there's a lot of suffering involved in the work that goes into the presentation of that book, and that suffering that I'm willing to engage in the creation of that book also belongs to the expressive dynamic and the expressive significance and torque, with which that book, or that I intend that book to resonate in the world, right? So it also belongs to that idea and to the sharing of and the presentation of those difficulties and that struggle to communicate. And that struggle to communicate also, involves resources. Like, for example, going back to the corporate panopticon, recently on my cell phone, I found it impossible to transfer data from this application called Clips to this application called iMovie. So the problem there is that representations of Aaron that utilize this animated icon, cartoon icon program, in which Aaron can realize himself in the form of this cartoon robot. I can no longer simply click on a transfer icon and move it into a form that I can put it up on YouTube. So I can still utilize Aaron, but if I utilize the representation of Aaron in this particular form, in addition to doing all of the work of the lip syncing and the miming of this particular character, then I have to figure out a way of recording that image from the iPhone onto another device before I take that recorded image and reproduce it. And that is demonstrated on one of the recent videos. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, well, this is Friday. Yeah, that's demonstrated on the desktop exercise for Friday, July 22nd, 2002, in which you see that I'm holding the cell phone and recording with my other hand using another device images of Aaron. And since I had to do that, I went ahead and I doubled the representation of Aaron. And those tactics, right, are what I would call, tactics of resiliency. When your resources are taken away from you, you find ways of working, and sometimes they're the best resources. It's the work that Lévi-Strauss refers to as belonging to the bricoleur and not the engineer. The engineer is like the hacker universe, right? It's the hackers are maybe work that independent idea of this hacker that exists outside the system, right? Is belongs in part, to this this concept of bricoleurship, but largely like they were engineers to begin with, and never really had to struggle, with resources. Never really understood like what it's like for some of us to have to take everything that we have to invest in a device that we can use to record or express, or that the Van Goghs the Van Goghs that had to struggle to just simply buy paint aren't often understood by very well by those figures that never had to engage those kinds of struggles. So going back to this title, the reason that I began creating the system, is the rationales were various and sundry. But there is a kind of underlying relationship to this idea of a democratic system, right? Even language is this way. We insofar as we're capable, right, phenomenologically, cognitively, physically capable of engaging language, we want our use of language to be unmitigated by authority. When people shut us up, we find it disturbing and troubling that those lines of communication are not available to us because for whatever reason we fall outside the sphere of power, or we're represented to the discourse that organizes fields of communication and community as being outliers or outsiders or not worthy of whatever it is, U.S. citizenship, poetic citizenship, aesthetic citizenship, for whatever reason, and so the interference, with those kinds of communication systems, I experience as this phenomenon of a kind of anti-democracy, and I see it in terms of these delusional movements, right, of election denialists and conspiracy theorists who somehow, justify self professed right to change reality and to alter the distribution of fact, right? Kellyanne Conway, would refer to the alternate facts, right? And I guess I see the interference on the part of both the corporate panopticon and the self-delusional renegade hacker who is always part of the larger system, whether is part of that larger system in the form of a Jesse Glass, who attempts to by means of whatever, stealing your private information, or a Mac the Knife, Matthew Rothenberg, or whatever it is, these individuals who somehow delude themselves that they have the privilege of stealing and organizing, information that allows them to essentially, destroy or alter your work and to see into your life in these ways, because they can, and because they have access to the engineership of such technologies and belong to such circles, right? And I really don't see it as any different from the January Sixers, whatever domain it is, right? And therefore belongs to this delusional space of privilege, right? In which the democracy of something like a system, right, of communication that when you go to your toolbox, you get the hammer that you're looking for rather than the screwdriver. But that technological ability to turn the screwdriver into a hammer, I don't see as belonging to the work of the renegade magician, but rather to the delusional allegiance to the corporate panopticon. And so, in all of that, this expression, unhacker altered, there's an attempt to get at that. And the adjective, that I formulated, the neologism Post-Galileonine, refers to this idea of flat Earth and the persecution, right, that's so well documented by Bertolt Brecht in in the play, his play based on the life of Galileo, and the persecution on the part of the church, right, and we see it, now again, today. You will believe in a flat Earth, or will destroy you. So, I guess the Bezos phenomenon, the Elon Musk phenomenon, and then the mini hackers, whoever they might be, whether they're Jesse Glass's minions stealing your social security number, or those sort of self-delusional, artists who, believe themselves to be anarchists, but basically participate in ideologies of authoritarian oppression, whether it's educational systems that exclude you because you didn't have the proper resources to take the SAT test 150 times, or exclude you because you have a cognitive difference that they refuse to recognize, and even the recognition of it, right, is a threat to the position, because their position in this like liberal delusionalism that is why I'm not a liberal and why I consider myself a radical, is that there's this great leveling device in the apparatus of measurement tools, right? and never mind that none of these people have really actually studied the theory and social reality of what measurement tools in fact represent. So if there was like a poetic citizenship test, right, it would belong to this domain of spheres of economic resources and power and connectivity that is very much part of the corporate panopticon, and not some like egalitarian tool, right? Anyway, so that's what Post-Galileonine, and then reality specific, means I had observed this, the space-time travel communication digit designator 5 times. So like that's like going to your toolbox and wanting the hammer to be the hammer and the saw to be the saw and the screwdriver to be the screwdriver, but finding that when you went there, that Apple suddenly turned the screwdriver into a saw, or that suddenly that the saw is no longer usable because Apple took the blade away. And it leads to other questions too, like in our relationship to digital and virtual technology, do we really ever own anything? For example, so I own my iPhone. I bought it outright. But most of what it does requires apps. And if Apple changes the way that I can use those apps, then it becomes useless as a saw or as a hammer or as a screwdriver, right? It's like a screwdriver without maybe it has the tang, but it doesn't have the blade, and maybe it's a saw and it still has the handle, but it again doesn't have the saw blade. And so in order to get the saw blade back, I have to update my device that I supposedly own, but I can no longer use, right? And so this is a constant process of overcoming these obstacles that are economic realities, and that I consistently find is not a part of the liberal discourse in any of these in any of these domains of aesthetics, semiotics, communication theory, and there's always this abstraction, right, that fails to account for all of the encounters and obstacles and destructions, right, that many of us like have to live through on a daily basis, and it's not unrelated, right, to the white, the white privileged imaginaries, like failure to understand like the ongoing trauma of living in racist America, like just not getting it because they don't experience it. They don't experience it as trauma, and they don't experience that there are many individuals who have never experienced what it means to wake up in the morning and wonder if your lights are going to work, or if your car is going to start, or if you go to your toolbox, if all the tools will still be there. They have no experience of living in a world in which your building might fall down, or that your water might be turned off, or that you'll have to find a solution. So today, I may do this, or I may spend 8 hours, walking, to the next town to fill up my water jug and la 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 la. In the ongoing election suppression, when we vote in the midterms, we may have to do this, or we may have to figure out a way to borrow somebody's vehicle to drive 100 miles to vote, to register and vote, right? So space-time communication, space-time travel, communication, and coordinate systems rely in a certain degree on fairness and this democratic principle and the relationship of that principle to this metaphor of the toolbox. That when you go to the toolbox, you want the screwdriver to represent a screwdriver. So yesterday, I went to the toolbox and I wanted the screwdriver to represent a screwdriver, not a hammer, and that screwdriver took on the form of this number 5, and for whatever I did, I couldn't get the number 4 to turn into the number 5, which it was intended to do as a screwdriver, but it wanted to be something else, and so I found a way of using the screwdriver as a hammer, as a screwdriver again, right? And the way that I did that was I created this work, Notes Towards a Non-Delusional, Unhacker-Altered, Post-Galileonine, Reality-Specific Representation of Space-Time Travel Communication Coordinate 222.5. And yes, indeed, what's actually going on. And of course, what's actually going on, again, is a reference to the Sly and the Family Stone album and the word riot. And what I couldn't get at in space-time travel communication coordinate 222.5, which is titled with the word riot, because 222.4 wouldn't progress to 222.5. And that's where I think the real renegade ship occurs, right? And there's this expression, you can't I don't think the word is deconstruct, but you can't, I'll use the word deconstruct. You can't deconstruct the master's reality with the master's tools. You can't deconstruct the master's house with the master's tools. You can't destroy the master's house with the master's tools. Because in using the master's tools, you always reinvest in the domain that those tools support, and so I suppose this little video that runs 1 minute and 40 seconds or something like that is a way of addressing this problem of the ownership of these tools of the master, and who in space-time communication coordinate systems really owns even the idea of observation, right? Isn't something that we do freely, and that so to speak is never to be. We're never free to speak. We're never even free to observe it speak. Even our underground railway systems are taken over, right? And so the way that this thing works, or the way that I found a means of presenting Aaron beyond the obstacles that Apple places in your way. Well, now you can't use this program. Well, now your system is obsolete. We updated it, and there's this mask, right, around like, well, that's not our fault. We have to keep updating. It's not about us making money. It's just about, we need to progress with the technology. No, it's totally about making money. You become obsolete so that they can make you buy new stuff. if they were concerned with, your real ability to utilize the tool and not have it turn into a saw when it was supposed to be a screwdriver, they would create, right, the new system in a way that it would allow you to interface with what you had last year. And these phones are expensive. I mean, are you kidding? You're supposed to buy a $1,000 cell phone every 6 months? That's insane. And some of it, the problems aren't just because one is a Luddite, but the problems are that you really, really do have to keep buying in order to keep speaking, right? And so again, the problem of the contradiction arises. Can you speak against the master's house in ways that don't require you to reinvest in the master's tools? And the engineers of such tools are very good at making it nearly impossible to own whatever it is that you create. So this idea, insofar as I understand it to be mine, this system of space-time travel communication coordinates, and as a creator, as a creative artist, belongs to me. But I don't have control over it, and to some extent, I'm okay with that. Like, I don't care how people utilize it to send messages to me or others, but I do care that that the toolbox maintains some relationship to reality as non-delusional, hacker-altered, post-Galileonine reality-specific representation to reality. That is, that if there are 5 views, that they're not misrepresented as 4. The ones that I really like are when the numbers go back. So so if you think that this is a rant and that I'm the delusional one, this is the really great one that I like. So sometimes the space-time travel communication coordinate system, the observational views, will represent, like, say, this video has 2 views. Then it'll go back to 0, right? Okay, so there's no universe in which observing something can be taken back, right? No matter who is observing it, never mind like that we can identify the entity of observation, but there's no possible reality universe, von Neumann or otherwise, in which an observation can be undone, right? That like it's like virginity, like once it's gone, it's gone. You can't undo, you can't unsee, or you can't unhear. You can repress it, and you can forget it, and you can disremember it or misremember it and all of that, but you can't undo it. So I find it amusing, when one of these observational views yesterday had represented a number 1 or 2, and then today represents the number 0, and that's whether one assigns it to the panoptical corporate or to the renegade, hacker altered or whatever, but I'm trying to argue, still belongs to the use of the master's tools, and therefore whatever delusional idea, that the January 6ers had about taking back, right, the election, that they're serving the function of the corporate delusional, and the same is going on here, and so I guess this particular audio track that I'm recording right now for the organization of this set of the library collection sets 271 to 315 of 360 is there, as a reminder that these obstacles will always be placed in our way. And very often the only way to truly continue to do the work is to find a tool that, like this 1 minute and 49-second video, Notes Toward a Non-Delusional, Unhacked or Altered Post-Galileonine Reality-Specific Representation of Space-Time Travel, Communication Coordinate 222.5, and yes, indeed, what's actually going on, finds a way of manufacturing, its own tool, and that doesn't belong into the master's toolbox. And even if the master can break into your house and take that tool away, because someone certainly can. YouTube can say, we don't like this video, Notes Toward a Non-Delusional, Unhacked or Altered Post-Galileonine Reality-Specific Representation of Space-Time Travel, Communication Coordinate 222.5, and yes, indeed, what's actually going on. And so we took it down. And the way that they'll take it down is they'll say that there was nudity in it. They don't say naked, right? They say nudity or whatever. And of course, there's no nudity in this video, but there's never been any nudity in anything I've ever put up. But I've had videos of the moon taken down, moonlight, and I've had videos of that are depictions of my face, behind a cell phone, taking an image of a fence. And those were called images of nudity, or I guess the designator is nudity or sexuality. And of course, these images have nothing to do with any of that, but very much like the way that Apple claimed, right, like that they were policing the social environment and the community standards with these panopticonal invasions of one's privacy. These are the excuses that are utilized to take down your videos. And they won't specifically come out and say we don't like the way that you're addressing the way that we police you, but they will produce a discourse that has again nothing to do with what's really going on. In the same way that the Supreme Court produces this discourse on what constitutes life, when really the issue is about denying women rights, right? It's all about the denial of freedoms and liberties and rights, and it's produced in this discourse that manufactures this domain of ethics that have nothing to do with the world, and whose vision of the world is as delusional and unstable and pre-Galileonine as anything that the January Sixers can come up with.